Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you've already had a chance to reconnect with some old friends here, introduce yourself to new ones, and engage in some conversation. It looked like that walking around the hallway. So now it's my sincere pleasure to introduce our next plenary speaker, Dr. Paolo Bonato, who will also be serving as a chair for the panel entitled Independence and Aging in Place. Paolo's a remarkable researcher, collaborator, and human being, and I feel privileged to have been able to work with he and his laboratory for nearly 20 years. Probably within about 30 seconds of us getting together, laughter just emerges, and I don't know what it is, but it's really fun to work with colleagues that like to laugh as well. And he's got a great sense of humor. Paolo serves as a director of the Motion Analysis Laboratory at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital here in Boston, and is an associate professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at the Harvard Medical School. He's also an adjunct professor of biomedical engineering at the MGH Institute of Health Professionals and an associate faculty member at the Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering, and also an adjunct professor of electrical and computer engineering at Northeastern University. Clearly a highly sought out collaborator. Dr. Bonato runs a highly innovative, vibrant, and productive lab that explores the use of robotics, wearables, and other technologies for neuromuscular rehabilitation and healthy aging. And many of our OSHA studies have benefited from his and his group's generous support and partnership. You can read a lot more about his distinguished achievements in his bio on the Hoover platform. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Dr. Paolo Bonato.
So thank you so much for inviting me to give this short introduction to this session, which is going to be devoted primarily to fabulous speakers that we have lined up today. But I'll just provide sort of with a few slides, a bit of context to what we want to discuss. And of course, we want to discuss the use of technology in the context of healthy aging and independent living. So I want to start by celebrating the fact that we're getting older, right? And so this, unfortunately, is often presented as a problem. I think it's stupid, to be very honest. I enjoy so much spending time with my father. We lost him a few years back. I enjoy so much talking to my mother. I called her last night. I talk about the fabulous dinner that she had. She's in Italy, so she had good food, right? And so why not celebrating the fact that we're getting older, right? So that's absolutely a beautiful thing. And do we want to stay home as we get older? Of course we do. My mother does definitely want to be in a place, and she's not alone. And in fact, if you want to age in your own place, you're in good company. The ARP ran a survey a few years back, and more than and about 80% of people that actually want to age in their own place. So what do we need to accommodate for it? Right? And how has technology facilitated that, right? And so we've been told that we need to stay active, and some of the wearable technologies that we're going to discuss today in the sessions, they certainly have helped. Perhaps the first versions of the consumer electronics that was made available to us was not as good as we would like to help us with good behaviors, but I think there is improvement that will be discussed during the session. It's interesting, there is a very well thought, in my opinion, page on the NIH website that looks into common misconceptions about aging. And this is a technology that we will not discuss today, but I think that autonomous driving or self-driving cars are going to make a huge difference in older adults. And it's not necessary that I think that in a couple of years, we will see self-driving cars out there. But the technology that has been developed, I think it is absolutely phenomenal and a game changer in the context of aging in place, because all the sensor technology and part of the technology that has been developed um, for autonomous driving. I think it's going to allow us to drive longer, be more independent. And in fact, on the website that I just mentioned, when should I stop driving is one of the questions that come up. And if you have parents like I, I do, right? So my mother, this time, right? And so there are older adults, you know that that's actually a really difficult transition when they can't drive any longer, right? So it's amazing what technology is going to do for us. And I think our generation, at least mine, there are younger people in the audience, right? It's going to be the first generation in which this transition is going to be actually much, much easier. So technology is doing quite a bit for us, right? And NIH is doing quite a bit for us. It's telling us how to keep ourselves healthy, with good activity that we run, so good workout, eating healthy, and so on and so forth. But what I want to question just in the next few slides is whether the healthy aging is real, right? And the reality is that the great majority of the population um, is not as in perfect shape as the lady that you've seen in the previous slides, right? In fact, I started Googling, right, older adults and healthy aging, right? And I found the pictures always of the same individual. There must be so few that even if you Google images of these topics, right, you find the picture always of the same people, right? And so the great majority of people, in fact, 80%, approximately 80% of the population are affected by a chronic condition listed there in the slides, right? And you have to deal with that, right? So it's beautiful, it's fantastic that we're getting older, right? But we have to be prepared to deal with managing these conditions. And is technology helping us in this context? Let's look at diabetes, right? It certainly is now common knowledge that you don't have to punch your finger, twice a day any longer, right? And so you can utilize a digital health technology that through analyzing interstitial fluids allows you actually to have continuous monitoring of your glucose, which is a lot more effective than taking a couple of samples during the day. Right? And this technology just became available in the last few years. Let's look at arthritis. This is not a commercially available product. It's something that we have been working with over the last few years. But if you have, for instance, knee osteoarthritis, you can utilize, if you want to maintain mobility, which we know is important for this patient population, you can utilize robotic systems that actually allow you or help you keep your mobility by generating torque, by generating forces at the ankle, so assisting during ambulation. So as a patient or an individual with knee osteoarthritis, you can actually participate in a walking program. And what the technology does, we have studied is biomechanically, and our colleagues led by Scott Dept in Stanford have done tremendous work in this area. So because you are assisting the generation of torque to propel yourself forward, right, during the plantar flexion or push-off phase of the gait cycle, then you unload the anatomy. So you have lower loads on the foot ankle complex. So for instance, you have a decrease of the loads on the Achilles tendon, but you also, because you have biarticular muscles, you have muscle that actually span two joints, you have an unloading on the middle compartment of the knee, which is the one that most often is affected in this patient population. And so you can participate in a walking program, you can monitor yourself, and then you can work with a coach or a clinician to improve your adherence to the walking program, thanks to a technology that now allows you to participate in the program without feeling pain all the time. So what about stroke, right? So this is a different situation, right? And so in the first two conditions that we consider, we're looking into a chronic condition. It's worsening typically over time that you have to manage, but it happens gradually. Stroke instead is a sudden event that's going to change everything in your life, right? And so what's the objective here? Well, the objective is to restore function after stroke as quickly as possible. And is technology helping us in this regard? Well, certainly, there is robotic technology that we can utilize or can leverage on to maximize motor practice, which we know to be particularly effective, specifically if the intervention is delivered early after a stroke. And so to be able to do that with minimal supervision by our therapists, given the limited number of therapists that are available to us, and simultaneously maximize dosage, so the amount of therapy that these patients actually receive. At Spaulding, we've been experimenting with a local company through SBIR funding. The idea of setting up multiple robotic workstations, use video tracking techniques, provide feedback to the therapist through a dashboard and potentially directly to patients so they can actually work as you do at the gym, getting feedback on your own. And what do we do when we send people home? Can we continue the intervention? This is a project that we started a few years back with another local company through SBIR money. This is also supported by NIH. We provide wrist units to these patients. In these patients, there is limited use of the stroke-affected limbs for obvious reasons, because it's more cumbersome to use it, but because patients don't use it, they lose it. So motor practice is actually really important in this patient population. And we have shown in pilot studies that we can provide patients with reminders and encourage them through a behavioral intervention to integrate the use of the stroke-affected limb in activities of daily living. And we observed, even in our pilot study with limited sample size, improvements in the amount and quality of use of the stroke-affected limb. So we keep using technology, we keep getting them better and better. So what is the key in this situation? As I said, stroke, sudden event that changes a lot in people's lives. So what are the possibilities? Not everybody is going to be back home right away, right? And so, but we want to get there as quickly as possible. And that's why the intervention is as aggressive as possible. But also there are many situations in which a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living facility has to be considered because there is not enough support in the home setting. So can technology help us in this regard? And a lot goes with safety and chores that people have to perform in the home setting. And service robots are incredibly interesting in this perspective. And you might think, well, you know, this is a nice picture, but, you know, when is this going to happen? Well, it turns out that there is a colleague, a dear friend, Shirley Kemp, who left Georgia Tech to start a company and put together this really neat, relatively low cost, about 20, 25,000 apiece, robot can actually help in the performance of chores around the house. And you will see in the videos a portion that's teleoperated and then a portion of the video in which the robot is actually autonomously making decisions about opening a drawer, taking care of, you know, the laundry in the washing machine and things of that nature. So he really made the choice, Charlie, of moving away from academia to have incredible impact in real life conditions by providing access to this technology through a company that is started a few years back. So this is a relatively low cost system, a very sophisticated, you know, it does actually map the environment. It has plenty of sensor technology to figure out interactions with the environments. This is actually the portion of the video where they show the autonomous functionings of the robot. And as I said, we do expect that this is going to be coming down in cost, but it's already remarkable, in my opinion, that this is an affordable piece of equipment that people can take home to get help when their level of visibility requires help during the performance of activities of daily living. So I hope that what I briefly said provides a bit of context to the session, where you will see as we go through the talks of our esteemed colleagues, fabulous lineup of individuals, that we will go through use of wearable sensing technology, digital solutions, for well-being and preventative care, to managing chronic conditions via the use of both digital health systems that are wearable as well as contactless technology that will be described in the following talks. And then a bit of description of the challenges associated with designing systems, robotic systems that interact with human beings. So as I said, we have three fantastic speakers, and I'll just take care of very brief introductions right now so that we can move fast and spend the time in the most effective ways by asking them to concentrate on their science and talks. So the first speaker is going to be Dr. Shyamal Patel. He is Senior Vice President of Science at Oura. He has tremendous experience with the development and deployment of digital health solutions. It was with other companies that we're not going to mention at the moment because it will be a long list before that. And he took these fabulous, remarkable positions at Oura a couple of years back, 3 years ago, I think, 4 years ago. Time flies. The second speaker is Professor Katabi. I like to introduce her as a genius. In fact, she got the MacArthur Award. Right? And she does really incredible creative things. If I can describe it just in simple words, she likes to throw radio waves at you, see the way they bounce back to you, and then monitor your activities accordingly. And then Professor Becker will be the third speaker of the session. She is what I like to call a through engineer. Right? She does fabrications and design. That's what she's passionate about. She had a plumbing issue over the weekend. I bet $50 with my friends that she fixed it herself. And in fact, she did. She just mentioned it before the session. That's what you would expect from Kai. So without further ado, Dr. Patel, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, Paolo. All right. So there are, if you look at the world today, I think we can all see this confluence of technological forces that are reshaping almost every aspect of our lives. There are some of these forces that I'm excited about, some not so much, some I'm not really sure about. One of these shifts that I see from my lens that I am really excited about, and that's what I want to talk about, is this idea of democratization of health data and how that will shape the future of health and healthcare. And I think as we think about this shift, one of the key things that is going to generate is an empowered healthcare consumer. And I think that's going to be important for wherever you are on your life journey, whether you are young and healthy or somebody who is thinking about like aging and how you maintain your independence. I think the fundamental role that health technology is playing is essentially enabling you to take ownership of your health journey wherever you are. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Some stats that I just wanted to share, and I think these are stats more about how we interact with the healthcare system today, or maybe how we don't interact with the healthcare system rather. So the first one is only 8% of Americans get regular preventative health screenings. 33% of individuals don't have a PCP. I'm actually one of them. I've tried. That's not because of lack of trying. 64% seek care only when they're extremely unwell, and 66% skip annual physical exams. And I've skipped a bunch, just not again because I couldn't either get an appointment or my PCPs changed and I couldn't get one. So it's something that is more about tells us a picture of about how we are able to engage with our healthcare system, not about the outcomes and other things. Those are also a big factor. And I wanted to kind of illustrate like what this looks like in terms of my personal health experience. Again, just these are the only slides with Gen AI images, so just bear with me. But I'm not good at illustrations or painting a picture, so I basically asked DALL-E to come up with an illustration of a typical healthcare experience, what that looks like, at least in this country. Maybe this is fairly universal. And these are the first two images that it came up with. The first one is somebody, like in the waiting room where you're waiting patiently to be seen by a doctor, and then when you are in the exam rooms, sitting on a table, describing what's going on with you. And it's more of an observation. This is kind of how my experience looks like. And if we do a raise of hands, I would probably imagine that this is what most of us experience, right? And whether this is so. In terms of characteristics, like this is how this healthcare experience translates into the impact on me. There are lots of aspects. Healthcare is very complex, so I don't want to generalize that into some kind of singular sort of. It's hard to like really boil that down into a single slide. But if you think about what this experience looks like for me as an individual, these are like three things that I can think about. The first one is it's very episodic, right? You're doing this every 6 months, 1 year, or when you get sick. Whereas our health really is not episodic, right? Our health is what is described by these bars under this line. It's changing on a daily basis, going up and down. There are fluctuations that are happening, and what we get are these intermittent snapshots. The second characteristic is that our healthcare is based on population norms, right? When you get a snapshot of your health, the interpretation of that snapshot is through the lens of what works or what the normal looks like for a population. Again, maybe there is nothing wrong with that, but that's essentially how it works. And the third aspect that is a result of these two is that it's reactive, right? By the time clinical signs appear, we might have actually missed important window of intervention that could have potentially prevented or at least reduced the severity of whatever health condition that we might have developed. Now, this is like this healthcare, this model of healthcare has delivered quite remarkable outcomes, right? So I think the point is not to just dunk on this, but more, look at where there might be opportunities and how we might need to shift this model of healthcare. So the chart on the left here shows life expectancy from the early 1900s to 2021, and across the world we see almost more than a doubling of life expectancy over this period. And I think the healthcare system that we experience should get a lot of credit for these gains. The chart on the right shows something similar, but the x-axis here are the costs, essentially how much we spend. And the United States is a particular outlier here, where we are seeing clearly that we are spending more and more on our healthcare, and seeing sort of a diminishing returns on that investment. And I think the question for us is like, why is this? And I'm sure most of the people or all the people in this room know this better than I. But if you look at the top contributors to deaths by different risk factors, the top 5 are essentially associated with lifestyles and behaviors: hypertension, high blood, diabetes, obesity. And so there are a lot of these conditions that are rooted ultimately in lifestyle and behavior. There are also other factors, but lifestyle and behaviors are a big component. The chart here on the right shows the proportional contribution of different factors associated with premature death. And again, we see that about 40% is behavioral patterns, followed by genetic factors at 30%. And then healthcare, the quality of healthcare that you receive accounts for only 10%. And so the natural question is, why does the quality of healthcare you're getting not matter as much in the big scheme of things in terms of driving health outcomes? And I think for me, it goes back to the point that our healthcare system is not really designed to tackle like lifestyle behavioral challenge. We are very reactive and wait, until something develops to start acting. I think the good news is that we all see this. I think there is a shift that is going on right now with where we are shifting from this world where we are taking action when we see this first sign of early clinical signs, to a world where we are able to identify changes early on and take action before significant issues develop. And there are three aspects that are fundamentally necessary for this. One is the ability to longitudinally and monitor our health and track our health in a very comprehensive multimodal way. The second is the ability to get insights from this type of tracking in a timely way so that you can act on it. And the third one are interventions, actions that we can take that are personalized and targeted to your specific needs, not rather than the needs of the general population. So you can get to the back to a state of wellness. And kind of going to the main theme of my talk, I think the one of the key trends that is happening right now is this idea of democratization of health data. And what this is leading to is a healthcare consumer that is really empowered, and we are shifting the centroid of healthcare from the hospital to the home and to the individual. And there are three factors that I see. The first one is access to products and solutions for health tracking. As healthcare consumers, we have incredible sort of access to different technologies that we can use. The second one is access to an ownership of personal health data. And the third one is access to medical knowledge and personalized health insights. And I'll try to unpack this in a few minutes. The first one is access to personal health technologies. So if you look at, starting with a smartphone, pretty much everybody in this room and across the world has a smartphone in their pocket today. The last time I did a count, there were 16 different types of sensors embedded within the smartphone. And so there is an enormous wealth of sensing capabilities that we have in the smartphone. If you go beyond the smartphone over the last 15, 20 years, we have seen enormous proliferation of wearable technology. There are about 1 billion wearable devices across the world, with I think more than 50% of adults in the US owning a wearable device. And these are technologies that are on our bodies 24/7 and capturing a lot of different aspects of our health. And so there are other technologies like CGMs, hormone testing, heart rhythm monitors, and beyond those, especially with the COVID pandemic, there has been a shift in how we think about point of care testing, like things that we maybe would have not thought before the pandemic are becoming quite normal today. Thinking about getting a kit at home and getting your full genome sequenced, or getting a blood test, or gut health, and so on. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have incredible access to personal health technologies that we can access today. These might not be things that are accessible to everybody, but I think over time, the cost and accessibility of these technologies will continue to increase. The second aspect is access to healthcare data. Like 30%, more than 30% of the data generated across the world comes from healthcare and health. And I don't think we have really, as healthcare consumers, we've really had true access to this data. This is actually starting to shift with new laws and regulations like HIPAA and GDPR, and also platforms like Apple Health and data exchange standards like FHIR. We are seeing a shift in our ability to access our own health data. And this will continue. There is still a lot more work to be done to bring all of your personal health data together and give you seamless access. But this is another shift that we'll continue to see. The third one, and I think this is the most critical one. So if you had access to all of your personal health data, there's not much you can do. In fact, the more access you get, the harder it becomes to make sense of it. And if you had asked me a few years ago, unless you had 24/7 access to a panel of scientists and medical doctors 24/7, you would really not be able to do much with this data. This is starting to shift. There's still TBD in terms of how far we can go. But when we think about access to personal health data and the ability of technologies like AI to essentially make sense of this data for you and connect the dots between things that might be going on in your life with your health risk factors, I think you truly can envision a world where everybody has a doctor in their pocket. There is a lot to be done here, but I think there are early signs that this could be possible. So I think if we see that this type of a world is realized where we have a truly empowered health consumer, I think that that will be a fundamental uh, enabler to this idea of healthy aging and aging in place. I think that's.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to tell you more about what we are doing. So I'm really interested exactly in the problem that Shyamal talked about. Like basically, why is it that today medical data is episodic, expensive, and really we don't have that much access as users, as patients? So if you think about that, like because medical data is episodic, like when do we get even medical tests, like among doctors and clinical tests? If somebody is suspected of having something bad, like cancer, for example, start doing so many tests. We just learned that only 8% do the regular tests, or 33% do like have primary care doctor. So, but really, if you want to do preventative medicine, if you want to take care of patients in like as they live, and particularly now we are seeing with aging, chronic diseases being like 80 to 90% of the cost of the healthcare in the US. If you want to do that, you really need to know how your patients are like feeling and what are their symptoms today and tomorrow and the next day. You want to be there knowing their physiology, their pulmonary system, their heart, cardiovascular, motor symptoms, nervous system. How do you get that? How do we get there? And to me, the answer is ambient. Like imagine if we have ambient monitoring of all physiological signals. What do I mean by this ambient? So imagine if people can just live their lives and we have devices that are, with the help of AI, can look like a Wi-Fi box in the home, but they can use these electromagnetic waves that we are sitting in an ocean of electromagnetic waves. They can use these electromagnetic waves that bouncing off our bodies to get measurement and insight into almost every single physiological signal that we have, from respiratory to cardiovascular to sleep to EEG to motor symptoms, everything. So this is exactly what we started in my lab at MIT. And actually, over the last few years, we also spin out a company called Emerald to take this to consumers. So with the help of AI, we analyze these radio signals that bounce off people's bodies in their own homes. And we actually get all of those physiological signals. We call that device the Emerald device. And I'm going to show you a few examples of what we can do today. So this is from like perhaps the earliest experiment and earliest video that we captured with one of my students in his office at MIT. You see that we are like the device not even in this office. We are monitoring him through the wall from the adjacent office because we know wireless signal traverse walls. Now there is a red dot over there, and this is where the device thinks that he's standing right now. So if I play this for you, and as he moves, you can see that the red dot is moving with him. So basically, because as he moves, he's changing these electromagnetic waves, our AI in the room, like behind the wall, is able to track his motion, and be able to capture exactly where he is and how he's moving. Now, of course, basically everything that we do, we compare to the gold standard, which is Paolo here has these Vicon capture rooms at Spaulding with like you plan the whole ceiling with infrared cameras. So we compare with that for any motor symptoms to show that we are highly accurate. We have peer-reviewed publication in top journals and conferences. So I told you this was a while ago, and let me show you what we can do today. So now the big frame is what we get through the wireless signal. We can get a full skeletal representation of the person. The camera at the top is just so that you know what's going on in the environment. And let me play this for you. So you see now he's not just a dot on a floor map. When he sits on the chair, you know that he's sitting. When he stands up, you know that he's standing up. When he moves with his right foot, you know that he's moving with the right foot, with the left foot, so on. So basically, being able to capture people motor symptom and musculoskeletal symptoms all the time in their own homes, whether they have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, ALS, etc. And whether they are just like aging people and they have issue with sarcopenia and frailty. And you can see also it captures multiple people. So having having multiple people is not an issue. And everything is like published in top journals and conferences in machine learning or medical journals. We can also measure your brain waves. As you go to sleep, your brain waves change and they enter different stages: awake, light sleep, deep sleep, and rapid eye movements, or REM. And these sleep stages, I mean, we know in the US, 1 in every 3 American has some sleep problem, but actually sleep is really a platform for almost all diseases. Definitely anything that is neurological diseases, but in fact, also like inflammation, almost everything. Today, if you want to get very accurate sleep staging, you send someone to a sleep lab, they put these electrodes on their head and body, and they ask them to sleep like this. This is actually from MGH. So we have like a lot of collaboration with the MGH sleep lab. You can see that he's not happy. And I mean, you can't blame him, I guess. So let me show you what we do. This is our device. We transmit very low power signal, analyze the reflection using AI, and we spit out a hypnogram. So a hypnogram is what you get in sleep lab. For every 30 seconds of sleep, it tells you whether your brain now is in light sleep, deep sleep, REM, and how it's moving between these sleep stages. And the nice thing is that actually we have just published paper with MGH sleep lab, also showing for 850 individuals that we monitor, that we get an accuracy that is comparable to a sleep lab, because in a sleep lab, you have to bring a technician to look at these EEG signal to manually say, oh, this is deep sleep, this is light sleep. And there is inconsistency between 2 sleep technicians, and the accuracy of the system using completely automated wireless signal is on par with the differences between 2 sleep technicians. This person is sitting like you, and what you see on the screen is nothing but his inhales and exhales. We ask him to hold his breath, and you're gonna see the signal stays at a steady level because he inhaled, he did not exhale. Again, everything is compared in this case to FDA approved respiratory belt to show that it's highly accurate. Our recent edition, which is not published yet, but I want to share with you because I'm so excited about it. So we are using generative AI. So you condition on think about conditioning on the wireless signal as your prompt in ChatGPT, but instead of generating text, generating someone's EEG. So this is a sleep EEG spectrogram of an Alzheimer patient, 83 years old. And this is the one that we generated with our AI. So as you can see, it's highly accurate. Now, this is, of course, very important. Like basically, if you are trying to follow the slow waves, for example, because this is the time when the microglia in the brain is mostly active. You are trying to track aging, whether the person, the microglia in the brain is able to clean from toxic behavior. So you really need that change over time, and you'd be able to track it just with wireless signal in people's home every single day. We are, as Paolo always asks, what is really available today to users versus what is still in the research phase. So our devices are already deployed with pharma companies who are developing drugs for Alzheimer, Parkinson, ALS, Crohn's, lupus, atopic dermatitis, some rare diseases. And so they are actually used by the people today, but not in clinical care yet. I want to show one example from that is targeted toward a disease that affects the old community. So Parkinson's. So if you think about neurodegeneration, diseases like Parkinson and Alzheimer's, so they start in the brain almost 10 years, if not more, if not earlier, before we actually detect them. And in Parkinson's disease, we typically detect the disease from the tremor and the stiffness of the motion. From the motion, basically, is the motor symptoms. But the motor symptoms happen late in the disease. And by the time the motor symptoms start appearing, 50 to 80% of the dopaminergic neurons are already damaged. So we are detecting a disease at a time when 80% of the neurons impacted by that disease are already damaged. So how much of chance we have at treating that disease and be able to affect it? If we can detect Parkinson by something other than motor symptoms, by autonomic changes, for example, that happen earlier in the disease, maybe we can start like having much better control over the disease. So here we show that AI can actually detect and screen for Parkinson from nocturnal breathing, when people are sleeping and from their breathing without any motor symptoms. And this appeared in Nature. So we take these respiratory signals that we know we can easily get from wireless. We train the neural network to answer 2 questions. Does this person have Parkinson's? And if they do, what is the severity of their disease according to the gold standard? It's a very large study that has about 8,000 participants. MGH, Mayo Clinic, and University of Rochester are collaborators here. And let me show you some of the results here. So these are called rock graphs, like on one axis is sensitivity, on the other axis specificity. If you are not familiar with these graphs, the only number that matters is the AUC. And you can interpret it as accuracy. So with accuracy of about 90%, we can detect from just the respiratory signal obtained using wireless whether this person has Parkinson's or not. And that we show also with like smaller set, of course, that like in many cases, it can detect it pre-clinically before diagnosis. We can also manage the disease. So in Parkinson, when you give somebody levodopa does not actually cure the disease. All that it does, it controls the symptoms. And when the impact of levodopa wears off, the person starts having motor fluctuation. So here, what you see on the x-axis is the time in the day. 4 means 4 a.m., 5 a.m., etc., 24 hours. And on the y-axis is the gait that we measure for a Parkinson patient in their own home. And this patient takes his first dose of levodopa at 6:30 in the morning. And you can see as he takes the levodopa, like how his walking starts becoming much faster, more agile. And then within about within 2 hours, the effect of the drug wears off. So you see this red line going down, dipping. He takes another dose of levodopa, and again, the gait speed goes up. And then every time he takes a dose of the drug, you can see like the fluctuation in his symptoms. Now, of course, this is not good. I mean, if you are a neurologist taking care of Parkinson of a patient, you want to stabilize this. You don't want motor fluctuation. So let me show you an example. So this is another patient. You see their motor fluctuation, but after the doctor reacted to the motor fluctuation, you can see they change. Instead of giving them 3 doses, each one of them is 2 tabs. He made it 6 doses. Each one of them is 1 tab. It's the same amount, but rescheduling when they take the medication, and the amount just stabilizes these motor fluctuation and what we call in Parkinson on-off behavior. So you can use it both for screening for diseases, completely non-invasively, for managing diseases, for wellness and health, and all of that stuff. That gets me to the end of my presentation. I mean, for full disclosure, I work with so many different entities. Of course, they support the research and support my work. Thank you very much. I look forward to talking more to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. So I want to talk to you about a complementary track or thread in that instead of being entirely hands-off, how do we add a sense of touch to healthcare, physical touch? You may be a little bit confused as to why there is an animal on the screen that may be a little bit unfamiliar. That's a sea cucumber. So I work in soft robotics. I work on picking things up gently and robustly. What do I mean by robust? Well, I'm an engineer's engineer, as Paolo said. Robust can mean a lot of different things. It's both strong, it works for a long time before failing, it works well in adverse conditions. And a lot of where I design robotic touch is in the deep sea for deep sea biological sampling. So we'll talk a little bit today about how we translate that to healthcare. So you have the context of me. I'm a mechanical engineer, machine designer, product designer, kind of intersection, a manufacturing engineer, and I work on a lot of soft robotics. I lead the Fabrication Integrated Design Lab at MIT in mechanical engineering. And some of the things I want you to think about today is kind of what we want out of touch with the robots that we might work with, whether that's assisting a patient, assisting a caregiver in assisting a patient, maybe kind of monitoring someone, assisting someone. And obviously translating this from a deep sea framework to a healthcare framework. So what I have on the left there is a gripper that's down 800 meters underwater, picking up a sea cucumber gently. Why that's significant to me is not because that animal specifically is the most interesting. Actually, I got into this in efforts to monitor deep sea coral, particularly endangered species. But before they let you touch the endangered species, you need to prove that you can gently and safely pick up something else. So a sea cucumber is something that people eat, where the marine biologists are much less interested in these. But what is interesting for me and was meaningful is these are very gentle creatures. And with the current technology that marine biologists were using, these poor things would be eviscerated with the grippers that you normally have. Sorry for the graphicness there. But their stress response is to avert their stomach. It's a little bit like saying, here's my wallet, please don't hurt me. And so it's really meaningful actually that we can pick this up gently, put it back down safely and see that we haven't stressed out the animal. Very important. And so we want to see that we can do that both with people. And that's both how we interact, how we make the hardware, and also how that hardware appears to people. So in the interest, similar to my context here, where I'm not in healthcare, I was not in marine biology. And the first thing for me is understanding what it looks like with this task. Now, I'm not trying to make fun of rigid robotics here. These are actually really impressive devices. They're just made to pick up pipeline for laying oil pipeline or for demolition. And they're not so great with these moving targets. You can see when it's not gentle, it also makes that target no longer moving. Limited vision is often a thing that challenges us. These are actually particularly clear videos that the folks at NOAA were able to provide with me of their more challenging grasping targets. But things like complex shapes and compliant targets, while that sounds like kind of an easy thing for you, that's actually really challenging for a robot, particularly traditional robots. So in addition to getting used to kind of what these challenges look like for professionals, I also actually go out to sea with a lot of the marine biologists. So this is my life for about a week at a time. This is the Nautilus. That's actually the vessel that discovered the Titanic. And that's Hercules on the right. That's an ROV, remote operating vehicle. I'm going to say ROV for short. And then we have Argus on the left here, which was actually the ROV that discovered the Titanic. I don't go in the water. You couldn't pay me enough to do it. Instead, I make robots to go in the water and to pick things up gently. Most of the videos I show, and they're limited today, are out of this bubble cam. So you have very limited vision and limited kind of feedback on where we are in navigating. And then usually they're using these rigid manipulators. So for the most part, soft robots are really well suited for this deep sea biological sampling task because the grippers we're making are made out of soft materials. So that means that when we're picking something up, the hardness of the gripper that we're picking things up with is closer to the hardness of the thing that we are picking up and makes it able to adapt to that thing. And that means I can do that automatically. These are kind of dumb robots, if you will, in that they do the same thing over and over. They're just essentially water balloons. If you imagine a doctor's glove, you inflate it and it closes. That's basically what I'm doing. I've just put a lot more engineering into how it does it. And then on the left here is the first example of our in situ deep sea biological sampling. That's from 300 meters underwater in the Red Sea. And then on the right here is an example that's gone below 3,500 meters underwater. And I will tell you, this is one of the most aggressive robustness tests that I have ever experienced in the American Museum of Natural History. This was an interactive exhibit. It really gave me more appreciation for how many cycles you need to be able to endure for something to be able to be considered robust. But thinking about more how the ROV pilots might use something or someone in healthcare, you really don't want your robotic gripper to be a little bit like this claw game. Hopefully a lot of you are familiar with this. It's good at its job, which is taking your money, but bad at picking things up intentionally. So my job is to make the anti-claw. Now, the ROV pilots are really good at this game, but my job is not to make people good at compensating for lackluster tools. My job is to make tools that are easier to use. So I want something, I decided, that's gentle, robust, conformal, adaptive, and dexterous in its grasp, and has distributed contact. That'll become more clear when I get back to kind of what that looks like. I'm going to divide these into 3 different categories and show how I've implemented those in the context of deep sea biological sampling. But as I'm talking about this, I want you to imagine kind of what are the qualities that we want to then capture similar to these for healthcare, for assisting people in the home or in a doctor's office. So I'll come back to this, but basically I'm using passive contact tuning. I can basically design the mechanical structure. So instead of using software, I'm making robots that are a couple dollars a piece and just automatically are designed mechanically to do what we want them to do and limit contact forces. Active contact tuning, imagine if you could turn the friction of your fingertips on and off to change how you manipulate something. And then distributed contact, imagine if you had, instead of 5 fingers, many fingers to pick something up. In my first naive imagining of how this might be implemented in healthcare, I thought, well, we can use this to extend a sense of touch. If you specifically cannot see a patient in person, we have telehealth options where you have visual feedback, you have audio kind of interaction. We clearly have both wearable and non-wearable monitoring now. But what if you actually wanted a sense of touch to help someone through some exercises? Well, luckily, I've been able to work with Dr. Bonato and his team to realize that nobody really wants to feel like they're a sea cucumber being picked up by soft robots coming out of nowhere. So part of this exercise has also been thinking about how to redesign them so they're actually an inviting presence to work with. Now, for me, I would really rather come from the ceiling. It's a lot easier for a lot of different reasons, but I won't go through the math. But it's something that we have to keep in mind while designing things. So working with Dr. Bonato and his team, we were able to interview them and get a sense of like, how might these actually be used either in person as an assistive device or remotely if you're in a situation where you want to interact with a patient and cannot get to them, or maybe it enables more interaction in between hospital visits. Okay, so coming back to then these 3 different ways we can tailor that sense of touch. First one is passive contact tuning. Basically, how can I change the underlying structure so I don't even have to worry about software? I've programmed it into the structure of the software robot to do what I want it to do. Now, before they even let me pick up a cucumber, I had to pick up a pretzel. So you can see from this picture, I wasn't doing so well in picking up the pretzel. There's a lot of kind of under the hood engineering that I hope I make very simple, but I'll skip. If you're curious, ask me. I'm a huge nerd about kind of design and fabrication. But basically with the structure, again, we design it so that this closes conformally and without crushing the pretzel can get a very secure grasp, but then also validate the fact that we do want to make sure that that's limited in how much contact pressure we're applying. Basically, if I'm only going to hurt something, I'd rather not pick it up in the first place. My slides are a little bit out of order, so I'll skip one here. Basically then adding to that, we can also program some of the interfaces so I can guarantee that both my underlying structure applies a certain amount of force, and then essentially add a mini memory foam mattress in there that has to be open cell because I'm operating in the deep sea, but then can limit and basically have a nonlinear response in the compression. So we limit how much force is applied. And we know we have this buffer between 10 and 50% compression as like kind of a safety zone. Now, let's see, does this work? No. Okay, so the previous slide was just going to tell you that I'm going to start talking about the active tuning now. So this is where I said we could turn our fingertip friction on and off. These silicone rubbers are often really high friction that makes them sometimes a little bit into like sausage fingers that get caught on things. So I thought, well, you know, if I want to be a little bit more dexterous, what if I could tune the friction at those fingertips? So the fingers are actually applying a light force to this light bulb, and I'm just turning the fingertip friction on and off as I manipulate it until it turns on. It's basically little pneumatic or hydraulic blisters at the tips of the fingers that kind of go in and out. Right, so the importance here is not so much that I'm making it stronger and doing a grip test, but just changing that way that we interact with things. And then for distributing contact, I'll tell you that one of the nicest things about soft robots is that they're soft and compliant. And one of the most annoying things about soft robots is they're soft and compliant. That means they're unpredictable. So a lot of people then try to make them stronger, and in making them stronger, hopefully more predictable. And I say, well, why not go in the other direction? Let's make them not only compliant in material, but also compliant in structure, so they can automatically adapt to whatever it is that they're picking up. So they passively adapt to the thing they're picking up. And you can see here kind of the concept drawing being that they have different modes of interacting with objects. And basically the object itself starts in part defining the shape of that grasp. It's hard to measure a soft thing, but what we can do is take CT scans of this and then reconstruct essentially a vectorized version of those to start looking at where filaments are entangling with each other and where they're actually touching an object. So you have something that is made up with lots of little individual, gentle, weak, if you will, contact points with an object or a patient. But then the sum of all of those contacts is then a robust grasp. Okay, so that's my deep sea biological sampling suite. And then we think about how to then implement this for maybe care and home. And so thinking about kind of what actions are most important. So again, I kind of adopt my early stage investigator hat of then with the kind help of Dr. Bonato and his team, kind of looking at what different actions we might want to accomplish and talking to physical therapists and saying kind of what are kind of the abilities of the tools that you have now? What are the limits? What could you do? What is it that you're actually doing in this process? And so having a semi-structured interview where I'm asking them for information of kind of what's most important, but then also trying to discover some of the things that they don't even realize that they're very good at. And I need to be able to try to mimic within the robots themselves. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead in the end of this, but where we're starting for is kind of doing exercises for upper extremity and applying this to potentially in-home care for stroke patients, where we could actually provide access to more care at home. So you would still visit the doctor in the hospital, but maybe this is an inexpensive way to get more practice and lots of repetitions of these exercises. And I'll skip forward a little bit. Current state, basically, the hardest thing right now is that soft robots aren't as strong as rigid robots. Is playing? Nope. Okay, well, let's see if we can go. It may or may not start, but basically what happens is that the robot picks up Daniel's arm, and what's notable here is that with soft robots, most soft robots aren't strong enough to do this. So one of the biggest things is that we're increasing the payload without increasing the force applied to a patient. If you want to see this video later, I'm happy to show it on my computer. Another thing is then just looking at what is the robot that you're interacting with. So my colleague, Harry Asada, is working on digital avatars, and then in my lab, we're working on physical avatars. Is this something where you would want something that has anthropomorphic hands? My opinion is no, I'd rather have a cartoon, but that's something to be seen of how people kind of react to that. Some under the hood engineering, I'll skip, adding some sensing so that we have proprioception and exteroception, not anything that's at the level of sophistication that Dina was talking about, but just to add to that sense of touch and feedback that we have built into the skin of the robots themselves. So these are essentially waveguides that go through the skin of those soft robots. And last thing to note is that you cannot build a soft robot the way you build a rigid robot. So a very important part of this is coming up with a framework for soft machine design so that they are actually more robust and will last for a long time and can be dependable. It sounds trivial, but that is so much of my everyday, is just making these things work well and easy to make. So with that, I'm just going to thank my group that's helped work on this and a lot of collaborators and pass it off. Thank you very much.
So we're going to have a panel discussion, but before we start the discussion, I wanted to provide the opportunity to ask questions if anybody has any. Don't be shy. Yes.
You guys have two professors here. Don't ask questions. We start asking you questions.
There's a switch on those microphones to turn them on if they're not working for you.
So I'll break the ice just asking a couple of questions here, right? And so I'll just leave it open to whoever wants to answer in the panel here. So I was wondering, we talk about really a subset of technologies that are suitable to foster aging in place and independent living in older adults. And I was wondering if you want to make any comments on existing technologies that you feel like are useful in this context, but perhaps encountering problems with deployment. Any comments?
Are you asking about ones that have problems with deployment?
Correct. Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I think every technology has its like ideal population and then tails of that population. So like if you take for example the wearables, I mean they have an ideal population and they have a tail for that population where they still are would be really good, but they might be like some adaptation or like a churn. You start to see churns and compliance. Even within the wearables, like the Oura ring might be easier for some people than, like, for example, a wristband, for example. And also there are things that are even more extensive than that, like where I'm sure, Paolo, you worked with technologies where you have to put accelerometers on like the legs and the knee and like the belt and all of that stuff. And then we go to the other side where like you have like the stuff that I was mentioning, which is the wireless, which is completely passive, but also it's not portable. So if you want to measure people on the street, for example, as opposed to the home, that may not be the most suitable technology. So in the sense, every one of these technology have ideal people that are target population for it, but also you can look at I would say the complementary role of these technology. Like we talked here today about multiple technologies, but I think also there is like many complementary aspect of that technology. So while we measure, like, for example, like with the ambient technology with wireless in the home and when people don't charge or wear their devices, like with like if people also are wearing their devices, for example, you get measurement outside and you can like use all of these measurements. Like with AI, we know that the more the data, the more the power. Of course, if we can activate something based on the measurements to try to help someone who's having an exacerbation of some sort, or just the usual everyday stuff, that would be very interesting. And I mean, we all know that in the future, we're going to see more and more that used in people's home, particularly for aging in place.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add to that is the importance of the design aspect, and the the user experience that you want to deliver with the technology. I think what often happens is, and I've spent time both in the sort of the clinical medical device world, and now I'm more on the consumer health tech space. And I've seen this, the design and the user experience aspect being very much sort of an afterthought on the clinical medical device side, whereas in the space where I work in today, that's actually the first thing you think about is you want how is a person going to be interacting with this technology, and while that doesn't have an impact in terms of the functional aspect of the product, like what you deliver in terms of what the problem it can solve or the thing it can measure. I think what it does have an impact on is how much a person will use that product. And one of the things that we see in our work is, because we designed the ring from the very sort of ground up, thinking about this aspect of what would be the form factor that would be most conducive if you want to measure sleep, right? And it needs to be comfortable. You need to minimize the number of times you need to recharge this, and all of these human factors that are actually more important to the success of what we do than honestly the technical aspects around what you can measure, how accurately. Because if you don't use, and if the technology is not accessible in terms of using an engagement, I think you lose a lot of the value. And I think that might be one of the things that, as we look forward, into the technologies that we want to build in the future, or the technologies that we have today and how we want them to evolve, I think this aspect is going to be absolutely critical, right? We are designing these things for humans, and that engagement and the want, like, it's not about just solving a need, but actually addressing the wants of an individual is as important.
I'll just add something fairly quick. You mentioned designing for humans. That's one of the hardest things I have ever experienced. As an engineer, I love designing machines or it's easy to design machines that have a very particular purpose and a very particular environment, but everybody's home is different and every person is different. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in kind of sensitivity testing to when you change a variable slightly or you change a variable a lot. And you often don't know what you're going to what to expect until you've discovered one of those edge cases that kind of completely derails some of your early assumptions. So it's kind of an awareness of how much people and their environments can vary.
I was wondering if you put, oh, sorry, there are questions. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you. I'm a movement therapist at the OSHA Clinic. And my question is, right now, you have to come to our clinic if you want me to touch you. And is there a timeline where I can bring my skills remotely into somebody, maybe another clinic, other part of the world? So is that even in anybody's thinking?
I mean, I don't know if I can give you a concrete timeline, but that is how I met Dr. Bonato, is looking for ways to make that possible. I would say my biggest challenge right now, first is thinking about, can I make my robots strong enough while still being gentle? And then also looking at it from a fabrication standpoint. What will probably bore the heck out of all of you, but is a really important thing, is kind of how many cycles can I use one of these before they fail? And it comes down to, I can make something 5 different ways with the exact same geometry. So basically I'll bake a cake in 5 different ovens and they come out very differently. And so I'm that engineer who's obsessively going through kind of what oven model and what kind of baking recipe should you use such that you have the most robust actuator coming out of it. So I think it's something that's a ways off, but prototype testing for that in the near future, I think in somebody's home, that depends on how much funding and how big the team is, perhaps. Yeah.
Don't hold my breath.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may comment, as you were asking the question, I was thinking I would really love to answer that we are taking reservation. You can actually put down a small deposit and Amazon is going to deliver it. Right? So, but of course, that's not going to happen. But like everything else, I think it's going to happen gradually. Right? In the way we have organized the talks today, you probably noticed we have started from technology that is commercially available, wide distribution, and then we moved to technology that came from a research lab, Dina's lab, right? It's now there are spin-off companies that provide that to the public at large, but not as available as an Oura ring or other consumer electronics. And then Professor Becker talked about where research is actually moving as we go forward. And if you look back 10 years ago, right, who would have ever thought that you could actually monitor vital signs on the basis of a ring, right? Professor Azara thought of it 25 years ago, but everybody thought it was crazy, right? So, and only nerds like us in the community, we thought, oh, this is super cool, right? And it took about 20 years before there was a product out there. I'm hoping that the needs are going to be so strong that there will be a pull from the market. And then perhaps what Kite is doing is Earning Lab is going to be made available a bit earlier. But I think that when we look into the deployment of technology, there is so much research at this point in time. What we need to think of is not when that is going to be available, what is the path that is going to allow that technology to be deployed to the web bedside or the home side in this case. So go ahead.
So this is for Professor Katabi regarding the emerald technologies you talked about, right? The ambient technology so that the waves come in and kind of really capturing data on anybody who is probably at home, correct? Or wherever that localized thing is, right? So do you think it'll be better to protect people's privacy to actually have a receiver on the person who wants to be targeted for that?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for asking this question. Like my intention was to end with privacy, but I forgot at the end to mention it. So yeah, so of course, privacy is very important, particularly like now, like we have like AI, which is a powerful technology, and we are talking about medicine and medical records, which are like highly like sensitive information. So this is why, for example, we decided to start in clinical trials where everything that we monitor is according to an existing protocol and basically like informed consent. And also, although we can monitor multiple people in the environment, we also have machine learning that knows how to zoom in on the participant in a clinical trial and basically ignore all of the rest. Like think of it the same way as like, you know, how like laser beams in driverless cars, for example, identify pedestrians and can zoom in on any voxel in space. Also, we have machine learning that say, okay, this is my participant in the clinical trial. I zoom in and track this person, ignore everything else. And also in addition to that, all of the data in our system, like we don't collect any PIIs or PHIs in the system. So it's all associated with a random ID so that, and also of course is encrypted and all of that stuff. So basically, both in terms of protocols, ethical approval from IRBs, informed consent, as well as technological components that would allow us to both ensure privacy and security together.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is April. I work for the Center for Mindfulness and Compassion. That's part of Cambridge Health Alliance. But I have more of a personal question. I'm actually an Oura Ring user for a year now, and it's been really helpful. The information that I've received, my own health data, helped me have better conversations with my doctor and some tracking some stuff during some medical things this year. But I'm curious about some of the advice that I get based on that data. And sometimes it hasn't been 100% related to my situation. And then I go to ChatGPT and ask it advice, and I tell it I have the ring, and then it gives me fantastic specific advice. So I'm wondering with all of you, like how much are we going to be integrating all of these things, right? A wearable technology, just be able to send that technology directly to my doctor to have a better discussion with my doctor, as well as advice in the meantime before I go have a physical interaction with my doctor.
Yeah, great question. I think this is where I think that's the future, right? Where these technologies, the personal health technology, right now there is a sort of a divide between the things that you use for personal health tracking and what information is used in your healthcare decision making. I think if we extrapolate like 3 years out or maybe 5 years max, that is going to go away. That has to, right? Because the data that you're tracking with your Oura Ring or your Apple Watch or your Garmin, right, whatever wearable, there's so much rich information there that we haven't figured out how to actually integrate and translate that into your healthcare decision making. But that's going to change, right? To your question about the insights that you get, right? One of the fundamental elements that is missing, that is a gap today in this technology, is context, right? Context is so essential. So when I think about wearable technologies or even non-wearable technologies, they're really good at tracking your physiology and behaviors, largely speaking, right? Physiology more so than behaviors, but the context is a really important aspect, and context is what makes it personalized, right? Without the context of your life, where you are, what things you're concerned about or thinking about, technology is just going to become a blunt tool, right? It's just going to be lots of information that may or may not make sense. We are actively thinking about it. I think the industry as a whole, I think, recognizes this, particularly as we think about AI. Context is the critical foundation. In fact, we actually have, I don't know if you've used it, but we have an integration within the Oura app that allows you to, it's called Oura Advisor. In the back end, we are using ChatGPT as a way, and we have a lot of guardrails put around that. So it's also not going to get into hallucinations and things that are out of context. So there is a lot to be done here. I think there are both sort of opportunities and pitfalls as well of throwing LLMs onto your data. So we need to learn a lot and navigate. But I think this is where over the next like year, 2 years, we'll see a lot of interesting things come out. Yeah. The other thing I would say is that we are like, as I know all health tech companies are trying to do this. We are also doing it for example, in the Oura app, you can go and export like a health report. So you can generate a PDF and bring that to your doctor.
I
That
just did
it's
that.
a
It was
low
super
tech
helpful.
way, right? But it makes it simple. And actually thinking about like technology, we don't always need some sophisticated, like solutions. Sometimes simple works better than something that is more complex.
Thank you.
Dina, you're doing a lot of work in this area, right? The AI in general. Any comments?
Yeah, so I think you can think about two levels of how AI can help advance healthcare. One level is really democratizing data. I mean, basically getting these measurements of your physiology, whether we are talking about your motor symptoms, your respiratory, cardiovascular, etc., all of the measurements, and really getting these measurements, the dynamism of the measurement, that's very important. So today we really don't have the ability to understand that dynamics, but I mean, our immune system, which is the system that controls almost everything, is really have a lot of dynamism that it's very important to understand. So that's one level at the data, but then there is a second level at the interpretation. And also, even within the interpretation and the insight, you can think about two types of insight. One insight is really about like having a doctor that's or automating an AI doctor or AI agent. It's not going to be exactly a doctor, but maybe like give you a first level like suggestions, but you can discuss more with your doctor. So that's one level. But then even the next level, which is super power, is really when you see this data, the AI can detect things that are currently unknown to medicine. Like when I showed you guys just a few minutes ago that we can screen for Parkinson's without touching someone every single day in their own home. No neurologist, even like the best Parkinson expert, can look at your respiratory signal and say you have Parkinson. And definitely not you are going to have Parkinson even if you don't have the motor symptoms. So AI opens up so many new things, even in advancing medicine. So there are opportunities at all levels, and hopefully we can capture those opportunities while avoiding all of course, the challenges with ethics and the working power and all of that stuff.
We're going to take one question on the right side and then the conference chair. So it will close. We still have time, right? Just a couple of minutes. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, I have another Oura ring based question, but if anybody else wants to contribute, then awesome. My name is Molly Bolger, and I'm a Chinese medicine doctoral student and a craniosacral therapist. And I'm curious if there is any or much research happening with Oura ring and Chinese medicine, acupuncture in particular, or craniosacral therapy.
There is some research going on at UCSF. There is an Oura Institute there, I believe, right? And I know there's a broad range of like things that they're looking at, including things like psilocybin and like other sort of. So I'm not sure. So short answer is I don't know, but I hope that there is research going on. That's actually a space where I see the most exciting things that are happening is this idea of like we haven't had these tools for very long, actually. If you think about it, maybe 10 years or so that we have had wearables. So I don't think we have really learned or figured out how to interpret our health data from through the lens of wearables, really, right? When you have access to longitudinal, multimodal health data and a new lens to look at your health, it's something that largely our interpretation of the data is based on like our existing knowledge of health and medicine, looking through the lens of wearables. But I think the future is where we ask really interesting questions and discover new ways of understanding, interpreting this data.
Thanks.
Peter.
I wanted.
There we go. I wanted to follow up on Arthur's comment, and I've been lucky to have been a recipient of his work and cranial sacral work and others. And this is maybe directed first to Kaitlyn, but so Arthur would put his hands on someone's body and he's listening. There's like this intuitive, almost subconscious haptic intelligence, especially at someone at his level. Same in a lot of manual therapists. And he was wondering how he can do this work from home. And I'm wondering what the potential of this technology is, not just for manipulating, but for listening, and listening in a systems level way, not just at the point of contact, but how does the whole system respond? So that kind of human intelligence, and whether AI can meet that in a way.
Sure, I think that's a great question. I think to get to that level, if it's possible, I think it's a hybrid approach, combining some of these technologies, both in like contact, touch, and sensing, but also some of the non-contact sensing and some of the wearable sensing, all kind of put together. I will say some of what I didn't present because it's not yet published is we are kind of making, essentially, if you imagine kind of veins of waveguides going through these soft actuators. So I have things that are sensing kind of the shape and the like both proprioception and exteroception of the robots themselves, and then adding actually also microphones. So starting to listen to kind of really subtle things that your body understands. Like we can pick up small vibrations that you don't even realize that you're paying attention to, and it tells you something about both what it is you're touching and kind of what maybe even that thing itself is touching. And so basically kind of distributing sensors within there, but I think it's never going to be a complete story that gets to kind of your level of perception without then incorporating some of these other systems in parallel. So maybe you have them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a long time before AI can do what Arthur does. But the hope is it can help you. So on one hand, the sensing, and like you can imagine in like the gloves that you might wear might like capture that sensing, and you could imagine microphones also in the environment to try to like also hear the respiratory signal, for example, while you are like pushing in a particular area, for example, what's happening. The other thing that I think is important when I work with like also PT expert in certain diseases, it's like being able to have a holistic view of how the patient is moving. Like the patient comes and like, say, for example, I give an example from Parkinson. The patient comes to a PT session or to the lab, and then they behave completely differently. We know the observer syndrome, like basically the white coat syndrome, basically the patient is acting for the doctor, but being able to watch that patient continuously, like every day, and while they are doing their rituals at home, and how the movement, like what is like the which limb is, does it seem that they have certain pains, certain deficiency, that can augment your knowledge much more and address certain aspects that you cannot just address with when the patient comes and sees you once. The other thing that is feasible also is to augment it, like for example, asking patients to do certain exercises or to change the way they walk, they move, they stand up, and being able to capture how they are implementing this in their normal life every day, without like cameras and completely invasive technologies in patients' homes.
I think I'll just kind of echo some of that. Is it sounds like monitoring over time and quantification of certain things. I think there are things that human hands can do that I think it'll be at least decades before we get to it with robotic hands. But one thing that robots and machines and data collection can do is provide you with a better quantification of a certain thing that you've already sensed. And so a robot won't be able to, in the next decade, sense the same kind of subtlety that you can, but it can quantify something and give you a plot over time. So where it's hard to remember the exact sensation that you experience with a patient on, like, let's say, 42 Tuesdays ago at 11:50, that sensation is hard to recall, but then it allows you to then track that over time and quantify it. So in a lot of metrics and exercises, we use very qualitative metrics because we have to. Then this gives a little bit of ability to start quantifying subtle pieces of that so you can build the story and track the story over time.
Very good. I think we will have to wrap up just in 1 minute. If we can take 1 more minute, I wanted to see if we can get closing statements from the panel members. Just very briefly, if you could wish that a technology is going to be deployed 10 years from now, right? What would you pick, and what would that technology achieve? How that would change the lives of older adults? Shall we start with Shyamal?
I think I would say not necessarily like a technology, but I think in 10 years, if we have solutions and ability for every individual to deeply understand their health and the tools that enable you to act on aspects of like managing and improving your health. I think that's where I see things evolving, and I don't know exactly what the recipe of that is, or what technology is going to be transformative. I think the thing is going to be more of a collection of technologies that we are building today and how they will evolve and manifest, including AI, wearables, robotics, a lot of the things that we kind of touched on today. I think they all will play a role in the future. One hope I have is actually that whatever we build, hopefully it's not going to diminish the role of human contact and connection. Right? I think one thing that I'm afraid of is we build technologies that are actually exacerbating this epidemic of loneliness and the social connection that we have today. At least when it comes to health technology, I hope that that's not going to be, it's actually going to be the other way, if anything, right? Actually, the human touch is so essential that we somehow figure out a way to actually enhance our ability to care for each other as human beings. And then technology is serving and enabling us more than replacing things in a way.
I think it'll sound silly, maybe a bit childlike, but I dream of Disney's Baymax being a possibility, and I feel like I'm working on Baymax's hands. And I would agree very much in that I don't want that to ever replace human contact. I think the place for a lot of these technologies to be used is where we're very strictly constrained to not have contact, to be able to extend a sense of touch that we have. So in a pandemic, or let's say regional accessibility, I don't think anyone's going to live in the deep sea, but for scenarios where we cannot have in-person touch is where I want these to be developed. And otherwise, I see them being kind of developed to be safe and robust so that they can work side by side. So we're not isolating, we're just augmenting what we can do in person.
Yeah, I guess I'm a technology optimist. So I think that with technology, we can, like you're talking 10 years, we can definitely move toward preventative medicine than reactive medicine, at least for the older population, like for chronic diseases exacerbation. Today, we know that there is about 20% at least of chronic disease exacerbation from like the water accumulating in the lung of like a CHF patient to COPD patient getting a bacteria, and then thinks he ends up with pneumonia and end up in the hospital, to someone's basically falling. So all of that stuff can be like, there are many like that are preventable, and that is very much doable, at least in all of these things that we know that they are preventable, avoidable. And even for things that today may not look as avoidable, but as our knowledge of like being able to react early, like in chronic disease, things and chronic diseases are really 80% to 85% of the cost of healthcare, and particularly if we're talking about aging population. So the hope is that instead of like really treating people when they are just the problem has escalated, you just prevent the problem for many of these cases, and that people not just live longer, but live better life.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the panel members. We do hope the digital health technology will provide us soon with actionable information that allows us to change or manage our health trajectories. We hope the robots will be available, service robots will be available in the home setting. I personally hope that they're not going to look like people because I think it's weird.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah.
But with that, I don't know if there are housekeeping, but let me just ask you to join me in thanking the speakers.